I thought it was just a routine check-in with HR until they handed me a paper that changed everything. Darlene. The HR director, with soft eyes and a tight smile, was already seated in conference room C, the one with the crooked blinds and humming light fixture, when I walked in. Sitting beside her was a man I didn't recognize. Late 30s, designer blazer, polished watch, and the kind of face that said this meeting was nothing more than a calendar formality. "Lance," he said, "from Executive Administration." "We appreciate everything you've done, Valerie," Darlene began, her voice artificially gentle. "As part of Tristone's structural overhaul in response to the 2023 cost forecast, we're recalibrating compensation." Lance slid the document across the table. Smooth. Deliberate. I opened it. My eyes scanned the page automatically until they stopped on one brutal figure. New base salary, $59,000. Effective immediately. I was making $148,000. My thoughts stalled. My fingers clenched the edge of the paper. I stared like the numbers might change if I looked long enough. They didn't. Darlene kept talking, something about market volatility and organizational alignment, but her voice faded into a hollow buzz. All I could hear was my pulse pounding in my ears. I nodded slowly, smiled even. "I'd like 24 hours to review this." Darlene exhaled like I'd given her permission to move on. "Of course." I walked out in silence, past the open office I used to oversee, past the bulletin board where my name was still printed under Director of Client Strategy, past the hallway where I'd once stood clapping during promotions that weren't mine. I made it all the way to the parking garage. Then I broke. In the driver's seat of my silver Honda CR-V, I cried the kind of cry that leaves your chest raw and the windows fogged. This wasn't a discussion. It was an erasure, wrapped in corporate language and buried under bullet points. When I finally caught my breath, I pulled the paper out again. Read every word. No severance. No bonus. Just one line at the bottom. Transition support will be provided if the employee cooperates. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just careless. It was premeditated. And I hadn't just stumbled into this job. I had fought for it, built it from nothing, brick by brick. They forgot that, but I hadn't. I didn't stumble into this job. I carved my way into it, back when Lindale Solutions was just a scrappy startup renting space above a shuttered hardware store in Asheville, North Carolina. I joined as a client support coordinator. I was 38, recently divorced, raising a 6-year-old daughter, and making $41,000 a year. Every phone call felt like a lifeline. I stayed late, picked up tasks no one else wanted, learned the back-end systems in my own time because I believed in what we were building. Back then, it felt like we were a unit. Cliff, the founder, knew everyone by name. When we landed our Series A funding, we bought sheet cake from the Kroger down the street and ate it off paper plates in the break room. We were underpaid, overworked, and fully invested. Sometimes I brought my daughter Natalie with me. She'd curl up under my desk with a coloring book and her emergency inhaler while I typed client briefs. People smiled at us, told me I was doing great, like that praise could pay for her prescriptions. When her father decided he needed freedom and moved to Colorado with someone named Tasha from his art class, I didn't get to fall apart. I got up the next morning and logged in like nothing happened. And I kept going for 9 more years. I rose from coordinator to team lead, then manager, then director of client solutions. I ran point on 72% of our client revenue, led a team of 9. I fielded 2 a.m. crisis calls, ran onboarding rollouts from hotel rooms, handled client escalations with calm precision and no complaints. But when I got home after that HR ambush and dug through my records, my heart dropped. That director title? Never in writing, never in a contract. It was mentioned once in an internal announcement and applauded in a Slack thread, but never reflected in my salary band or formal responsibilities. No updated scope, no documentation, just silence. I'd done executive-level work for 4 years, without protections, without promotion, and without knowing it could be used against me. And the worst part, I let it happen. I was too busy surviving, too busy managing prescriptions, client escalations, and holiday shifts, too busy crying in stairwells between meetings. Looking at that letter, all I could think was, they didn't just overlook me. They used me, systematically, strategically, and I let them, for far too long. I stopped blaming myself. That's where the shift began. It all started with applause, forced and hollow. They called an all-hands meeting for 10 a.m., and I remember checking my watch because I was honestly trying to feel hopeful. Cliff, our founder, stood at the front of the large training room in his old Lindale hoodie, the one he used to wear on late pizza nights when we were still building something real. But the smile on his face that morning didn't feel real. It felt rehearsed. "This is a good thing," he said, voice steady. "Westridge Dynamics is bringing the resources we've needed to truly scale." The room burst into polite clapping. A few people even whistled. I didn't clap. I was too focused on how Cliff never made eye contact. By 3:10 p.m., our email signatures changed. New logo, new slogan, a Westridge mission statement that read like someone paid a consultant to scrape it off a whiteboard. The following week came the integration workshops, then something called a departmental agility diagnostic, and then the disappearances. First, the interns vanished, then 2 junior analysts, then Jeff L., a product manager I'd worked alongside for 6 years. No exit emails, just chairs that stopped being filled. We were told it was part of a streamlining phase. My team of 9 dropped to 6, then to 3. By 7:40 a.m. on Monday, I was juggling 14 enterprise accounts with just 2 associates, neither of whom had more than 2 years of experience. I asked Lance, the Westridge exec shadowing our office, whether we'd be getting help. He smiled like a man delivering a TED Talk. "We're leaning into leaner structures. Builds resilience." Right? Resilience. If you're ready for the next chapter and believe in stories where quiet strength wins, go ahead and subscribe. The best part of this journey is just beginning. The work didn't stop at 5. It followed me home. I was answering client emails with a fork in my hand and contracts open on my nightstand. I missed more of Natalie's childhood than I care to admit. She asked me one night, "Mom, why don't you laugh like you used to?" I told her I was just tired. Then came the moment that jolted me. I logged into a Teams meeting 5 minutes early, 9:05 a.m., and heard 2 operations analysts chatting. "So, what's the plan for Phase 3 restructuring?" one asked. The other gasped. "That's not public yet." I froze. Phase 3? It hadn't come up in any leadership call, any briefing, any strategy doc. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, heart tight, thoughts spinning. Why was I always the last to know? By 10:20 a.m. the next day, I was in my financial advisor's office. Pen tapping, eyes on the screen. The damage was already done, but I needed to hear it out loud. I needed someone other than myself to confirm I wasn't overreacting. "If the new salary goes into effect immediately," Angela said gently, "you'll need to cut monthly expenses by almost 40% just to stay current on your fixed costs." I nodded, jaw clenched. "What about Natalie's medication?" Angela didn't answer right away. She pulled up another spreadsheet, adjusted a few filters, and leaned back. "You'd need to drop one of the supplemental insurance plans," she said finally, "which means out-of-pocket for her inhalers, nebulizer cartridges, and emergency visits would triple." "I know," I whispered. She nodded. "I'm sorry, Valerie." I stared at the wood grain on the table, right where it dipped and chipped near the edge, probably from other people like me, trying not to fall apart in that same seat. "They know," I said quietly. Angela looked up. "Who?" "HR Westridge. They know about Natalie's condition. It's in my benefits file. They know I can't walk away from our coverage. That's why they did it. Why they cut me so deep. Because they knew I'd hesitate." I didn't cry. I was too tired. The kind of tired that doesn't leave after a good night's sleep. The kind that lives in your bones. By 2:40 p.m., I was back at my desk, staring at a blank invoice template. The screen glowed, but I hadn't typed a thing. I kept replaying the numbers. Angela's voice. The silence in that room. There was no way out, and then I saw it. A yellow sticky note. I hadn't heard footsteps. No one had walked by. It wasn't there when I left for lunch at 12:30, but now it sat on top of my keyboard like it had been waiting. 5 words. Black ink. Slanted handwriting. "Read your original contract carefully." I looked around. Devin was on a call. Priya was typing furiously. Maria was still out for the day. I slipped the note into my tote bag, like it was classified. That night, after Natalie was asleep around 8:15 p.m., I sat cross-legged in my home office, digging through an old plastic file bin filled with HR documents. The original Lindale contract was at the bottom, dusty, warped, ignored for years. But when I held it in my hands, something stirred in me. Not quite hope, but something close. A flicker of power. A reminder that the paper they handed me wasn't the only one that mattered. If someone had gone out of their way to leave that sticky note, there had to be something worth finding. By 9:15 a.m. the next morning, I was sitting cross-legged on the floor of my home office, surrounded by open folders, wrinkled receipts, and half-drunk coffee. The smell of paper dust and stale stress filled the room. Natalie was already at school. I told myself I was just organizing old files. Nothing urgent, nothing serious. But deep down, I knew better. Something had shifted overnight. That sticky note hadn't left my thoughts for a second. Someone in that office wanted me to see this. Someone thought the original contract, signed back when Lindale Solutions still had its soul, still held something that mattered. I dug deep into the drawer and pulled out the old folder, slightly bent, corners frayed, yellowed from years of neglect. I flipped past onboarding checklists, W-4s, and a welcome letter from Cliff. And then I saw it. My signed employment agreement, dated nearly 10 years ago. And right there in black and white, paragraph 4, section B. In the event of a reduction in compensation exceeding 30%, the employee reserves the right to terminate employment immediately without obligation to provide transitional support or notice. I read it 3 times. Then again. It was real, still valid, never amended or superseded, legally binding. I sat back, heart finally steady for the first time all week. They thought I had no leverage, that I'd just nod along, thank them for the scraps, and stay quiet. But they missed something old, something they forgot I had, and I hadn't. By 11:20 a.m., I was scanning through my inbox again, looking for anything else they might have overlooked. Out of habit, I opened LinkedIn, expecting the usual junk, recruiter spam, congrats on your work anniversary posts, and outdated connections. But one message stood out. Subject, quick chat. From Marcus Lynn. My stomach flipped. Marcus Lynn, Vice President of Strategic Development at Eastbridge Partners, the biggest competitor to Westridge Dynamics. I'd met him once at an industry roundtable years ago. He'd complimented my client strategy metrics in passing. I hadn't thought about it since. But there it was. Hi, Valerie. I know this may be unexpected, but your name has come up more than once as we expand this quarter. If you're open to a conversation, I'd love to talk. I think we could build something meaningful. Sent. 2:17 p.m., 3 days ago. I hadn't even seen it until now. My fingers hovered above the keyboard. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was everything. But one thing was suddenly, unmistakably clear. I wasn't going to sit here and act grateful for scraps. Not anymore. I reached for my phone. In one hand, my original Lindale contract. In the other, that message from Marcus Lynn. For the first time in weeks, I had something I hadn't felt in far too long. Leverage. By 7:20 a.m., I was parked outside Willow and Main Cafe, knuckles white on the steering wheel. The air was still cool, and the sunrise hadn't yet burned off the morning haze. Natalie had asked why I was dressed like I was headed to court when I dropped her off at 6:50. I smiled and told her I had a meeting. She didn't need to know the rest. Not yet. I walked in just before 7:30 a.m. The cafe was warm and quiet, espresso machines humming, mugs clinking, quiet jazz playing overhead. A few early risers were scattered near the windows with laptops open. I spotted Marcus Lynn instantly. Tall, confident, sipping something green in a glass too fancy for a Tuesday. "Valerie Dunn," he said, rising to greet me. His handshake was warm and deliberate. "Glad you came." "Marcus." I nodded. "It's been a while." He gestured to the seat across from him. "Not long enough, apparently. Your name's been coming up. Clients, recruiters, even internally." I raised an eyebrow. "That so?" Marcus leaned forward, his tone lowered. Your reputation for client success isn't just on spreadsheets. People notice when someone with your track record gets sidelined. I didn't reply right away. Years in corporate taught me how to decode empty flattery. But this didn't feel empty. It felt intentional. So, what's this really about? I asked. He smiled slightly. We're scaling fast. 4 acquisitions in the past quarter alone. And we need leadership. Someone to build a new division focused solely on enterprise-level client experience. I blinked. You're offering me a role? I'm offering you freedom, he replied. Director of Strategic Partnerships. Build your own team. Define the roadmap. Full autonomy. He paused. Base salary starts at $165,000, plus equity and full health coverage, for dependents too. No relocation. We want you right here. I stared at him, still, steady. After everything I'd lost, this felt like the beginning of something I could finally choose. I was trying to process it all. I wasn't used to this. Being wanted. Being seen. Then Marcus added, almost offhandedly, "Oh, and your former data analyst? Jenna Ortiz? She joined us 2 months ago." I blinked. She what? She's been helping us map out gaps in Westridge's client service infrastructure. Still has access to a few internal benchmarks. My eyes widened. Jenna had never mentioned anything. But of course, she was smart, careful. She's loyal, Marcus said, reading my reaction. She wouldn't breathe a word unless we brought you in. And just like that, the pieces began to shift in my head. There was a way out. A path I hadn't allowed myself to believe in, until now. I reached for my coffee, took a long breath. "I'm listening," I said. And this time, I meant it. By 8:50 a.m., I was walking through the front doors of Lindale's office for what I knew would be the last time. I'd chosen my outfit with precision, sleek, structured, and unmistakably confident. My bag held just 2 things, a printed copy of my original contract and a clean notepad. That calm feeling, like standing on a dock just before setting sail, settled into my chest. Tracy from HR met me at reception and led me back to conference room B, the same beige box where they tried to gut my salary last week. The blinds were drawn. The hum of the air conditioner was the only sound. Dennis, the regional director, sat at the head of the table, flipping through a folder like he needed the illusion of control. "Valerie," he said without standing, "glad you're here. We're hoping to move forward today." I gave a polite smile and sat across from him, happy to confirm my decision. But first, I need some clarity on the transition. Tracy straightened in her chair. "Of course. What would you like to know?" I flipped open the notepad. "The Westgrove implementation is set to launch in 3 weeks. Who's been assigned lead on that?" Dennis blinked. "Still being discussed internally." "And Calderon Tech's renewal?" I asked. "Mark Chen asked to finalize that with me directly. Has he been reassigned?" Tracy hesitated. "That's also in progress." I raised an eyebrow. "So, there's no plan in place for the 2 largest contracts in our division?" Dennis cleared his throat. "We're still evaluating how to best distribute the workload." I nodded, slowly. "Interesting." I nodded slowly. "Interesting." Neither of them noticed me glance at my phone on the table, which had vibrated quietly at 9:04 a.m. I didn't check it. Not yet. "What about team leadership?" I asked, keeping my tone measured. "Maria, Devin, and Priya. Have they been told who's replacing me?" Tracy looked visibly uneasy. "That'll be addressed after your transition plan is submitted." "I see." I leaned back slightly in my chair. "So I'm expected to hand over nearly a decade of client trust, internal systems knowledge, and mentoring without any assurance that the clients or my team will be properly supported?" Before either of them responded, I reached for my phone and opened the message. It was from Sonia West. Subject, "Missing you on the strategy call." "Hi, Valerie. Just checking in. Our quarterly planning session started at 8:30 a.m., and we were expecting you to lead the review. Hope everything's okay? Let me know if I missed an update." I looked up from the screen and met their eyes. "Actually," I said calmly, "it seems like the people who matter most are already starting to notice what's missing." That was the moment I knew. They hadn't just lost me. They were about to lose a lot more. By 9:20 a.m., the silence had thickened. Dennis stayed stiff, flipping through papers he didn't need. Tracy's gaze kept shifting toward the clock. I set my phone down and folded my hands. I've made my decision. Effective immediately, I resign from Lindale Solutions. Tracy blinked. Dennis didn't even look up. I'm afraid that's not possible, he said flatly. Director-level roles require 2 weeks' notice and a full transition report. No, they don't, I replied evenly. Not under my original contract with Lindale. Paragraph 4, Section B. A reduction in compensation of over 30% triggers immediate voluntary termination. No notice, no obligations. His pen froze. Tracy fumbled through her folder. I don't think we have that version. Of course you don't, I said. You never issued new terms after Westridge took over. Dennis's jaw clenched. We still expect a professional transition. And I expect legal compliance, I said, rising. You chose to gut my salary by 60%. That was your decision. I straightened my jacket. This is mine. I'll be clearing out my things now. I walked past them both without waiting for a response. Back to my desk. The energy in the office had shifted. What was left of my team looked up as I returned. Maria's eyes were wide. Devin stood halfway from his chair. Is it done? He asked softly. I nodded. It's done. I packed quickly. A framed photo of Natalie, the backup inhaler I always kept in my bottom drawer. My notepad. 9 years of scribbled strategy notes and client histories. All of it fit into one small cardboard box. That's what nearly a decade of loyalty looked like. Just as I was about to grab my coat, Caleb, the intern, barely 22 maybe, walked up beside me. He didn't say anything, just slipped something into my hand and kept walking. A USB drive. I looked down, then glanced up again. He was already gone. By 9:45 a.m., I was in the elevator. My heart wasn't pounding from fear, but from purpose. I didn't need to guess what was on that drive. I had a strong suspicion. In the parking lot, I paused beside my car. The USB was still warm in my palm. I slid it into my bag without hesitation. They thought I was leaving empty-handed. They had no idea what I now carried. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel erased. I felt powerful. By 8:15 a.m. the next morning, I walked through the glass doors of Eastbridge Partners' downtown office. Not as a guest, but as their director of strategic partnerships. No fanfare, no welcome signs. Just a clean badge, a desk with my name already on it, and a fast-booting laptop ready for what came next. But what struck me most was the quiet. Intentional. Focused. No chaos. No panic. I unpacked my things slowly, Natalie's photo by the monitor, my old Lindale notepad set gently to the side. Not for use, just for memory. I told myself I was here to begin something new. But I knew better. By 9:30 a.m., my inbox had already pinged 5 times. All client messages. All from Lindale accounts I hadn't contacted. Sonia West, Mark Chen, Tom Ridley. Same message, different senders. Heard you moved. Can we talk? It's not working here. I didn't respond right away. I wasn't here for revenge. But I wasn't ignoring them either. No greeting. Just brutal clarity. Valerie Dunn's departure solves our third quarter problem. Use the severance language from Clause 14C to justify denying any payout if she resigns voluntarily. We avoid the PR headache and save approximately $88,000 in salary and benefits. Push her out before end of June. Timestamp, 2:12 p.m., 3 days before my HR meeting. Subject line, Q3 cost reduction strategy, Dunn removal. I didn't feel shock. Not anymore. I didn't even feel betrayed. What I felt was colder, deeper, the kind of quiet fury that doesn't raise its voice because it doesn't have to. They hadn't just underestimated me, they targeted me. They calculated my silence. They gambled on my daughter's medical dependency. And when they thought I might resist, they engineered the paper trail to deny me dignity on the way out. I stared at the screenshot, forwarded to me by Caleb, silently confirmed by someone inside Westridge IT. I didn't save it for revenge. I saved it for the record. By 12:20 p.m., 2 more client voicemails were waiting. I hadn't contacted a single one. I didn't have to chase the current anymore. It was already flowing toward me, and I was done holding the dam. By 10:05 a.m. on a rainy Tuesday, I sat inside a private mediation room just 2 blocks from Eastbridge Partners. No judge, no cameras. Just me, 2 lawyers, a mediator, and a Westridge executive whose name I hadn't bothered to remember. I wasn't there to make noise. I wasn't suing. I didn't need to. I brought with me 4 things. A printed copy of my original Lindale contract, 3 documented instances of internal retaliation, a signed, time-stamped resignation letter, and a hard drive containing 9 years of personal client metrics. Their legal team reviewed in silence. The mediator asked if I had anything to add. Yes, I said. I didn't steal anything. I didn't solicit anyone. I just built something with integrity. If your company failed to protect it, that's not my burden. They offered hush money, a token settlement. I declined. I walked out at 11:52 a.m., lighter than I'd felt in weeks. 3 days later, I officially accepted a promotion to Senior Vice President of Strategic Growth at Eastbridge. My salary more than doubled. I had full autonomy to build a new client division. Jenna joined as Director of Data. Maria and Devin followed shortly after. And the best part? I never made a single sales call. They all came to me. Not because of your company, Sonia West said over coffee, her tone calm but resolute, but because of you. She stirred her cappuccino slowly, looking me in the eye. We don't work with logos. We work with people we trust. By midnight on the final day of that quarter, 4 more clients had followed. Alder, Briarwood, Tetracorp, Halverson Partners. Each one submitted their termination notices quietly, cleanly, and with full legal precision. Each one cited the same reason. We prefer to continue our relationship with Ms. Valerie Dunn. And just like that, nearly $40 million in annual contracts moved with me. No billboards, no email blasts, no public posturing. Not because I fought back loudly, but because I stood still when they tried to erase me. I remember sitting in my office at Eastbridge Partners late one afternoon, watching rain streak across the window. The same kind of soft, gray rain that fell the day they asked me to accept a 60% pay cut with a forced smile and a hollow excuse. They thought I had no fight left in me because I didn't scream, because I didn't beg, because I didn't break anything on my way out. But silence isn't weakness. Silence can be discipline. It can be patience. It can be the sharpening of a blade no one sees coming. And when the moment is right, it can cut clean. If you've ever been told you're replaceable, invisible, or just lucky to be there, let me tell you something. You're not. You have value. You don't owe anyone your silence. But when you choose to hold it, make sure you're building something beneath it. Because the best revenge? It isn't what you take back. It's what follows you when you finally walk away. If you've made it this far, thank you. Truly. I didn't share my story to seek sympathy. I shared it to make space for anyone who's ever been made to feel small in a place they helped build. I'd love to know. Have you ever been pushed aside at work? Overlooked, undervalued, or erased? Drop your experience in the comments. I read every single one. And if you saw even a part of yourself in my journey, I hope you'll take a moment to support this video. Not just for me, but for everyone quietly carrying the weight of being indispensable while being treated as disposable. Like, share, subscribe, and say something in the comments, even if it's just, you weren't alone. Because I wasn't, and neither are you. If I've learned anything, it's this. Quiet doesn't mean powerless. You don't always need to slam a door to make a statement. Sometimes the most powerful move is walking away on your terms, with your dignity intact, your records clean, and your head high. If you're in a place right now where you're doubting your worth because someone in a title told you to, pause. That title doesn't define you. Their lack of recognition doesn't diminish your contribution. And no paycheck, however big or small, can ever represent your full value. So here's my advice. Document everything. Trust your instincts, and don't let anyone write your story for you. Your silence, when used with intention, can speak volumes. And when the time comes, may your exit be not an ending, but a reveal of everything you were building beneath the surface. You don't owe them loud. You owe yourself clear. I'm rooting for you. Always. Valerie.